What is going on, Hive Warriors? So today we're going to talk about, is intermittent fasting good for you? There was an umbrella study, which is not a meta-analysis, but it is a study looking at multiple different randomized controlled trials and the obesity-related health outcomes that came out of those who were doing intermittent fasting. So we're going to go ahead and use this study to answer the question, is intermittent fasting actually bad for you? Stay tuned. So out of 130 randomized controlled trials, which the randomized controlled trial is a very rigorous way to control the data to make sure that you have an intervention group and a control group so you can compare and contrast. That way you can have a more definitive answer if one is better than the other. They looked at randomized controlled trials that included intermittent fasting. Now, this study was called the Intermittent Fasting and Obesity-Related Health Outcomes, an umbrella review of meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials. So this is an umbrella review of the most powerful study design, which is a meta-analysis, which is something that synthesizes the data of all other studies, within those studies, there are randomized controlled trials, which makes them even more powerful. So this is looking at the question, is this good for you? Is this healthy for you? And this was run by Chanthawat Patakorn and colleagues and was released December 1st, 2021. So it's a brand new study and it was released in the JAMA journal, right? So what did they find? Let's just get right into what did they find. They looked at certain parameters with the participants from this study. There were follow-up periods. There were about 2 to 5 months periods in these studies, describing 104 unique associations of different types of IF with obesity-related health outcomes. And what did they see? They saw a lot of positive data for health that came out of this study. There were 28 statistically significant associations that demonstrated the beneficial outcomes for body mass index, body weight, fat mass, low density lipoprotein, cholesterol, total cholesterol, triglycerides, and fasting plasma glucose, fasting insulin, hemostatic model assessment of insulin resistance, and blood pressure. However, IF was found also to be associated with reduced fat-free mass, which fat-free mass is all of your lean mass. That means everything but fat. So muscle is included in that. And one significant association, which was 1% of the association of the total data that they were looking at, supported by high quality evidence, was modified alternate day fasting for 1 to 2 months. So those who were doing a modified version of alternate day fasting, where they're eating on the days that they should be completely fasting, and they did it for about 1 to 2 months, they're the ones that saw that reduction in fat-free mass. So one of the things that's super important is you cannot remove yourself from doing resistance training when you are doing intermittent fasting. A lot of people want to use intermittent fasting as the get out of jail free card. Hey, look, if I do intermittent fasting, I don't have to do resistance training because I'm doing intermittent fasting already. So I should be good to go. No, if you don't give your body a reason to hold on to muscle, your body will find a reason to let it go. So from all these studies that we're seeing where the fat-free mass with the intermittent fasting participants reduces, there are studies, for example, the 2011 study on intermittent fasting, where it showed intermittent fasting interventions had a 90% reduction with fat loss and just a 10% reduction in lean mass when compared to calorie restriction, which calorie restriction had 75% reduction in fat mass with 25% reduction being in lean mass. So what's the discrepancy there? Obviously, not everything can be fully controlled, but I think that if you don't also try to maintain or build muscle, you will be losing muscle in the process. And a lot of people, when they do intermittent fasting, they tend to reduce their activity purposely because they think that they're all right, or they feel that there may not be as much energy because they're not eating as much. So that keeps them from doing things that they're supposed to be doing with their fitness journey. But in terms of the actual metabolic health, I just listed everything there that they saw that was positive when doing intermittent fasting. So the narrative of intermittent fasting being unhealthy simply because you are fasting, because the word fasting is the scariest, is the boogeyman essentially to a lot of people. It's a false narrative, because every single study, and this year alone, I think over 2,000 something studies were released on intermittent fasting just this year alone. And every year it just gets larger and larger. But the thing that's crazy about this is that till this day, people will still let you believe that intermittent fasting is unhealthy for you, that there's something that is happening to you within your body that's just somehow it's unhealthy because you're just not eating 24/7. And that is just not the case. Because even when the studies show caloric restriction is no different than intermittent fasting, because there are studies that show caloric restriction and intermittent fasting net the same results when doing a randomized control trial. But even in those studies, the health markers, everything would be the same. The only thing that may be different would be the fat-free mass, and that is contingent on what type of resistance training or what type of physical activity were the groups doing. The people that were doing caloric restriction tended to do more physical activity and resistance training than those who didn't do intermittent fasting. So that's the link to that, is more so what is their physical activity that renders that result. But other than that, in terms of all of the metabolic numbers, intermittent fasting it keeps you just as healthy as caloric restriction from the data that we've seen so far. So when someone tells you that intermittent fasting is bad for you, what are they actually telling you? Are they just going based off of an innate feeling that if you fast, you are not consuming food, therefore there is some unhealthiness attached to that? Or are they talking about it in a more mental health kind of situation where, please understand that intermittent fasting and caloric restriction, in terms of your health mentally, there's not much difference there. You're still making a decision to create an intervention with calorie restriction, and you're making a decision to create a different intervention with intermittent fasting. Both will cause some sort of a stress. Now, if you wanted to do intuitive eating, for example, that is fine, because you value more of your mental health, and you don't want to feel that you're pressuring yourself, especially if you have had history of mental health when it comes to eating disorders, for example. If you feel that way, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to, but just understand that if you want to lose weight, the best systems are diet interventions, either calorie restriction or applying the Mediterranean diet, doing intermittent fasting. Those will net you the best results, as intuitive eating, when put up against any other diet system, any other one, anything. You could pick it from a hat. Intuitive eating did not net a good result in weight loss, but it did have a good positive mental health result. So if mental health is what you care most about, then you can focus on just intuitive eating. But if you truly want to be active and proactive with trying to lose weight, you have to apply some sort of intervention. And intermittent fasting is no different in terms of an intervention applied than caloric restriction, or even than eating 6 times a day while reducing your calories. It's still the same thing. There's an intervention being applied that could cause some type of stress when you are trying to lose weight. So just keep that in mind. I wanted to quickly just talk on this so that you guys understand that narrative of fasting being unhealthy in terms of the science has been debunked over and over and over and over again. Is kind of frustrating when someone just walks down the street and tells you, you tell them about intermittent fasting, they tell you, hey, listen, don't do that, man. You need to eat. That's unhealthy. They don't really know the science of it. So I'm going to go ahead and link the study down in the description box below. The Patreons will be pinned in the comment section below. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.